Hi and welcome to a Bubble one credit clear commentary. First of all, if you didn't expect the commentary on this video, then I will be uploading a dry version of the video that's just gameplay, so if you wanted to watch that, I'll put a link in the video description to that upload. So we're already into the game, and I think while we go through the first few simple levels that don't need much discussion, I just want to talk a bit about why I'm doing the commentary and the history and mechanics of the game. I think primarily I don't think the game quite gets the recognition it deserves. It's one of the few games from the 80s that still stands up really well, plays really well, is incredibly well designed, has so much depth. Like, I've been playing this on and off literally for 25 years and I still find new stuff when I play it. But I'll just go into the basics for those people who may not be so familiar with the game. It's basically a two-button game. You've got jump and you've got bubble. And the way you dispatch enemies, which is what you need to do to clear each level, is to trap them in bubbles like that. And then you want to pop those bubbles. Now, one of the subtleties of the game is that you can't just pop bubbles by touching them. You are a little dinosaur called Bub or Bob, or you're actually a little boy who's been turned into a dinosaur. But because you're a little dragon, dinosaur type thing, the way you pop bubbles is based on your physical character design, in the sense that you've got a little spine on the top of your head, as you can see, and you've got spines on your back. You can use them to break bubbles. So if a bubble's coming towards you, if it hits you in the face, it's not going to break. But if you turn around and let it hit you in the back, then it will pop. In addition to that, you can also break bubbles by using, like, pressure. So for instance, if there's 3 or 4 bubbles close to a corner and you walk into them, you can kind of squeeze them against the corner and then they'll pop. And you can also jump on them as well. That will break bubbles. So if you're going to try and get a decent distance into the game, you're going to have to understand these subtleties, because if you don't, it's going to get you killed really easily. It's very easy. Like, if you stand on a little platform and then a bubble comes towards you, if you're facing it, it will push you backwards a bit, knock you off the platform, and you'll end up dying. So you have to pay very close attention to what's going on, and you'll see on screen there are times when I'm just spamming the bubble button and blowing them willy-nilly. You can't just do that anytime you like. You have to know when it's safe, when it's okay to do. In the early levels it doesn't matter so much, but later on, when you blow bubbles and when you choose not to, becomes very important. So when you pop enemies, you will be rewarded with scoring items like fruits, and one of the primary scoring mechanics is that the more enemies you pop in a single go, the more points you get, the better the items that drop. So if you manage to bubble up 4 or 5 enemies and then pop them all together, you're going to get a much better score than if you're just doing them one at a time. You can have up to 7 enemies on screen at once in a level. And I think that's kind of the basics. There's all kinds of secrets that we'll kind of talk about regarding the items. So you see that I'm now blowing bubbles much quicker than I was a few levels ago, and that's because I picked up some sweets. There are 3 sweets to collect. One of them makes you blow bubbles faster, one of them makes your bubbles travel further, and one of them makes your bubbles travel faster. So it's important to get all 3. There's probably the best guide that I've seen on Bubble is from Adam Dawes' website, adamdawes.com, who I'll also link in the video description, because I used some of his strategies to get through some of the later levels that I was having trouble figuring out. So I want to give him credit where it's due for that. On his guide, he actually recommends not getting the sweet that makes your bubbles travel further, and I do understand that, because it can make some levels tricky. but personally I like getting all three, because it makes the enemies easier to kill, and for me that was more convenient because this is primarily a survival run. I'm not really going for score. I do a few scoring things here and there, which I'll talk about in a minute. But really, I just wanted to see if I could get through the game. Having played it for so long, I've been playing it since I was about 14 or 15 on and off. It came out in 1986 in the arcades, and in 1986 I was 10 years old. I started going to the arcade at about, I don't know, 14 or 15 I suppose. My local arcade did have a Bobble machine. I don't think I've really played it. I watched people play it a couple of times. It used to be one of the few games that the girls would play. So therefore you quite often had boys watching Bobble. But I don't think I really understood it or knew what was going on until, I don't know when. I think I played it a bit on the Amiga and the NES, but I don't think I really got into it and started playing it properly until I bought the double pack of Bobble and Rainbow Islands, which is the sequel, on PlayStation 1. And that wasn't a perfect arcade port by any means, but it was one of the better ones. And this game has many ports on many systems. And that goes right from like Commodore 64 and Amstrad, ST and Amiga. There was an MS-DOS version. It was on the Game Boy, the Game Gear. Like I said, I had it on the NES and PlayStation 1. And a lot of the ports were a bit dodgy because there was only a couple of them that were actually done by Taito. A lot of the ports were done by third-party companies who, I'm not even sure they actually had access to the original code. I think they were just watching the game and figuring out what they could, which is why a lot of the ports don't have the correct mechanics in terms of the way the items work and the way the secrets work. So if you are going to play it today, definitely install MAME and emulate the arcade version, because it's far and away the best version. And that's what I'm doing here. That's what allowed me to actually learn the game because of save state practice. Again, I want to talk about that a little bit later. Where are we now? We're up to level 14. For those that don't know, this is a 100 level game. And this is my first 1cc of the game. This is the first time I ever finished it. After using MAME to learn all the levels, I think I was probably doing full runs for just over 2 weeks, doing it for probably an hour or two a day for a couple of weeks to finally get the 1cc. It was not an easy task. There are still many levels that have what feel like a fair bit of, not randomness, but they're just a bit cruel. There's a few levels, once you get past 50, there are many levels where you bubble up an enemy and they escape from the bubble in about 1 second, forcing you to just bubble them and pop them instantly. And if you mistime your jump, if you're a tiny bit late, then you lose a life. And as far as I can tell, that's basically the end of your run. I don't think there's any recovery in Bobble. I've tried so many times. I had so many runs that would end somewhere between level 60 and 80. And I would always try to recover. I don't think I ever succeeded once. And what I mean by recovery is like powering up your character again, as in collecting the sweets. You need to collect the sweets to power up your bubbles, to make them faster, to make them travel further. And you also need to collect the red shoes to double your movement speed. Without those, you are so slow and pathetic that doing later levels seems nigh on impossible. So I would love to know if there are people who have 1 credit clears where they actually die, but as far as I can see, a 1cc on this game kind of has to be a no miss, because if you do die, you ain't recovering. I think we're going to get the heart music, special music. So the heart is like the power star in Mario, just lets you kill enemies by touching them. And we're just coming up for the first secret door here, which will be on level 20. If you get to level 20 without losing a life, which you kind of have to, like I said, although, well, actually, I guess you can recover early on. If you die in the first 20 levels, you can probably recover, but after that, it's going to be very, very tricky. But you can see there's a potion there on the right. That's one of the special items you can activate. There are many, many special items in Bobble, and what you don't realise, or I certainly didn't realise until I've been playing a very long time and started reading the wikis and stuff, is that I think pretty much everything in the game is controllable. All the items appear because of things you do. For instance, you just saw a green potion appear, and the potions, this is the first secret room, but the potions appear and fill the screen with items. They get rid of all the enemies, and the screen is filled with items you can collect for points. But what you don't realise is that, for instance, to make a green potion appear, you have to fall through the level, fall off the bottom, and come back in the top a certain number of times. So I think for the green one you have to do it 17 times, and then the green potion will appear. And the game is full of things like that, like pretty much every item. All of the sweets that you can get that I was talking about, if you collect them multiple times, then that makes items appear that increase your score every time you jump or every time you blow a bubble, or things like that. If you collect 3 sweets of the same colour, then a ringer will appear that increases your score. And there's I can't go into all of it, all the details on that, because there's so much of it, so many things you can get and so many things that you can do to try and make certain things appear. For instance, there's a cross that fills the screen with water and kills all the bubbles. And again, that's controllable. That appears because I collected a certain amount of special items, basically. So we're now through 24. It's going to start getting a little bit trickier now. There'll be levels when the enemies don't bubble up so long. So here you can see I've actually blown a few too many bubbles to make this work, but I'm trying to group them all up and pop them together for more points. And although this isn't a point scoring run, I have learnt a bit more about scoring in this game now, and one of the things that happens, so this will happen on this level because it's level 25, and any level number that's divisible by 5 means that when you kill the final enemy on the level, any empty bubbles you have floating around the screen will turn into point items. So that will happen on 25, 30, 35, etc. But you can also make that happen on any level by aligning the tens and the hundreds unit of your score to the same number. So what I mean by that is that if you look at my score at the moment, ends in 210. If that ended in 220, so the second to last digit and the one before it were both the same, then when I killed the last enemy, any empty bubbles on the screen would turn to point items. So that's one thing you can control. On levels where the enemies are bubbled for a long time before they escape, it means you then walk into a corner and pop a few bubbles, because each one is worth 10 points when you pop it. So you just pop them until the final 2 digits, apart from not including the final digit, is always 0. Okay, so you don't include that. But before that final 0, if the 2 numbers before it are both the same, then you walk into a corner, get the 2 numbers the same, then turn around, blow loads of empty bubbles, and then kill the last enemy, and all of your empty bubbles will turn into point items. There's a long explanation for a pretty simple mechanic. So I just got my first extra life. I do not get many extra lives in this run, only 2 or 3 I think. You get those from collecting the 6 letters of extend, just pop in the bubbles. And again, even if you keep getting the letter X appearing, you should still go and collect them, because the more you collect the same letter, the more it makes other special items appear. This is one of the levels I like because you can see there's these mechanics here with fire. So to do this level properly, you want to try and kill all the enemies with the fire bubbles, because that makes all the enemies turn into diamonds when you kill them with fire, and they're worth a lot of points. So even though this isn't a scoring run, that is one thing that I do like to do, is to try and find the correct way of completing the level. to try and do it with the special items and stuff where I can, because that kind of feels like playing the game properly or something. And in that respect, Bubble is very much a puzzle game. It's a puzzle platformer, and that's what I like about it, is that getting, you know, I've spent quite a bit of time in the last few weeks learning the last 20 or 30 levels, and at that point it becomes very puzzle orientated, where there's a lot of stages where it took me a long time to actually figure out the correct way to do it, and most of them do have a consistent way of completing, even if they seem very random. There's still a few that I do find rather random, and that's probably because I just haven't figured out the correct method yet. And this is the second special room. There are 3 of those. You get one on level 20, one on 30, and one on 40. And then if you get to level 50 without dying, you can actually warp straight through to level 70, I think. But I didn't do any warping in this run, because one of the things I did want to achieve in my 1cc was actually completing every level. And the only time that doesn't happen is when I get an extra life, because when you complete the extend letters, it automatically just warps you on to the next level. So I did that a couple of times during the run, but other than that I intentionally avoided the umbrellas in the stages, because they make you warp anything between like 5-6 levels up to I think maybe 15 or more levels. I'm just going to check the wiki on that. Oh no, it's 7 levels. The red umbrella will warp you on 7 levels, the yellow one will warp you 3 levels, but I avoided the umbrellas, so I wanted to do every level. So now I'm getting hurried up. This white whale type thing in the middle of the screen is the Baron, and if you take too long on a level, then the Baron appears and starts chasing you around, trying to hurry you up. And there are some levels later on where he appears very, very quickly and rushes you. One thing we haven't talked about yet is one of the things I love about this game is that every level has its own ventilation system for the bubbles. So the bubbles follow a particular route. Oh, this is a nasty one. This took me a long time to figure out, this level. It's this jump. I have to jump on a bubble just here. So this is a mechanic we haven't talked about. You can jump on your own bubbles. If you hold jump while you're jumping over a bubble, then rather than popping it when you land on it, you'll jump on the bubble, and you can use that to get to places that you otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. And getting that jump right on this one to get up can get you killed if you time it wrong or you haven't figured out how to do it correctly. This one I've never really figured out. I guess you're supposed to go up and get the special items from the question mark, but I just kill the enemies and move on. There's a few levels like that where I just went for the simplest solution just to move on in the game. It would be. I haven't decided yet if I'm actually going to carry on playing and try and do a proper scoring run, because you won't see me. That trick I was talking about aligning your score, I think I might do it once or twice, but I don't really bother with it, particularly in this run. I'm literally just trying to finish the game. And like I said, I've been at it a couple of weeks by the time I actually got this run. And there was a lot of luck involved in actually getting it. There's a few times where I think early on I made some pretty dubious decisions. I made some pretty dodgy jumps, and in this particular run, every time I did something a little bit sketchy, I just happened to get away with it. Whereas in previous runs, I've been dying, and that would end the run and basically start again. So now we're coming up for 40. This is where it starts to get much more challenging, and you really have to know the levels, and you have to know how to solve them beforehand. You can't just be reacting to stuff. This was always one of my favourites. There's a nice mechanic here So you see the enemy trapped in the bottom right hand corner. If you see here, I'm going to blow a load of bubbles and then pop them in order to pop the fire bubble. Just here, I blow all those and then, oh no, so I'm waiting for this blue fire bubble to go right, then I pop the green ones and the fire bubble drops down. So what's going on there is that if you blow lots of bubbles and they're touching each other, then popping the first one will cause a chain reaction to make all of them pop. And you'll see as the game goes on, there are a number of places where you can use that to your advantage. It's another subtlety of the bubbling, popping system that I like. This is the last secret door for the special one. So yeah, that's a good one. There are quite often situations where you think, well, there's no way to do this, it's impossible. But actually what you need to do is you'll find there's a special bubble, which will be either water, lightning or fire. That's the three special kinds of bubbles. Oh, remember this. There's a dodgy jump here. Watch this. I almost get killed, but right there. And that was really stupid. I should have waited, but I got away with it. Yeah, that's a solution to many levels, is to blow a line of bubbles as quick as you can so they all touch, in order to pop some kind of special bubble that's a long way away that you can't actually reach by jumping on it. Never really figured this one out. I always felt like I was missing something on this level. I just kind of stand around and shoot things. There's a potion down there that I don't think I get. And there really aren't many bells and whistles to this run. I think I might get a potion and a couple of special items along the way, but generally I'm just bubbling up the enemies, popping them and moving on. But yeah, I was talking about the ventilation system. I think that's one, quite often when you're stuck in a level, you just need to watch the ventilation system and where the bubbles are going. And this is one of my most hated levels. This is so random. The amount of times I would end a run on this stage, I would find it so annoying. I kind of had a method for doing it, but not really something that would work consistently. I would just try and to keep my distance and just jump as soon as anything was bubbled. This is another thing that I like about the game actually, is that occasionally it gives you little breaks like this where it'll give you a few nasty levels, but then after that it'll just give you 2 or 3 chill out levels where it's very easy to solve and you're just there to just pick up a load of points and move on. So you kind of get a little break and a rest halfway through. It does that a few times. One of the other things to look out for is that, like all games of the sprite genre, there's a sprite limit on screen, which is why you can only have 7 enemies on screen. But that also limits the amount of bubbles you can have on screen. That's another thing to be aware of when you're tackling trickier levels, is that quite often later on you're waiting for a special bubble to appear, like a lightning or a fire. And when you're in that situation where you need them to appear, like here, I think I need a fire bubble to kill this chap in the middle at the bottom. So I'm bouncing on the T, and I'm just going to hang around waiting for a fire to come up so I can pop it and get the last guy down there. But in those situations you don't want to blow too many bubbles, because the more you blow, the less likely it's going to be that a new bubble will appear on screen like that fire, because there's a sprite limit. So you don't want to put the game in a situation where it can't generate the thing you're waiting for because of the limit. So whenever you need something like that to appear, only blow bubbles when you actually need to, and don't just spam them. Because if you are playing for score, then one thing you do is spam bubbles a lot, like whenever you're waiting for the level to transition from one stage to the next. You just sit in a corner and spam the bubble button, because you get 10 points for every bubble that you pop. That was a dodgy jump as well. I was quite lucky to get away with that. And we're almost halfway through. It's just such a unique design in this game. Completely unique. There's nothing like it. I guess you could say it's kind of derivative of the original Mario Brothers, in the sense that it's just that rather than having a level to go through, it's just the one screen stage. You do the one screen and then you move on to the next one screen. And I mean, I can't really think of many games that work like that other than Mario Bros. I just love games where they're not totally derivative, and the developers have just come up with some new idea. Okay, this hasn't been done before, but we're going to try a game where this happens. And even in our age of sequels and rehashes, you do still see that. That's what I love about the From Software games. Playing some Bloodborne, so many unique ideas in that game, things that you haven't seen before. And there are still people doing it. There are still big developers that take risks, just not many of them. So this is a good one to show you the example I was talking about, blowing the bubble chains. Because here, what you want to do is you want to bubble up these enemies, push them towards the edge of the screen, so that when you spam lots and lots of bubbles, they will then touch each other. Because you can see these enemies in the middle, when I spam the button, it's not happening. But if I can push them towards the edge, like I'm doing here, then when I blow a big chain of bubbles and pop them, they'll be touching the enemies and they'll pop. It's hard to explain. I hope it makes sense. Hopefully you're watching what's going on. This is one that took me a while. It took me a long time to figure out that the best thing to do here is just to stay where you are. And this is one of the beauties of the thing that allowed me to actually finish this 1cc was finally playing the game on MAME, because I bought it on I bought Bobble on the PS4 Arcade Archives when it came out, whenever that was, a couple of years ago. And I play it now and then and enjoy it, and like I've always done for the last 20 years, I'd play it for a couple of weeks now and then. I'd get maybe to the point where I could get to level 40 or 50 without dying. And then I would get to the point where every time I want to go a bit further and learn a couple more levels, I'd have to grind through those first 30 or 40 levels again. Which kind of gets gutty, you know? Apart from the fact that you haven't always got time to do that, you don't always want to. And so I finally pulled my finger out and installed MAME on my PC and learned how to use it. And of course I discovered the beauty of save state practice, which is what has made the difference, obviously. I always hated this level. I never really figured this out. I just kind of go for it, and if I die, I die. You know, on this particular run, I was lucky. I don't really know what I'm doing on this one. But yeah, the save state practice. For those that don't know, MAME is an arcade emulator on the PC. It is very, very good if you like arcade games. A lot of them are emulated damn near perfectly now. Whether or not this is perfect, I don't know. I think on my copy of MAME, Bobble is labelled as green, and I think a green game means that it's basically working correctly. Oh, that's an important item I just collected there. That means that from now on, because I just collected that silver bell thing, every so often when I start a level you're going to see the screen flash, and that means that some kind of special item is about to appear when the screen flashes. Oh, there you go, the screen flashed. What was I talking about? MAME. So yeah, MAME is a great arcade emulator. It's free as well. It's been around for years. I have tried it once or twice, but never got into it properly until a couple of months ago when I decided to actually properly work out how to use it. And it's very easy. It's not complex. I'm not terribly technical when it comes to those things, but it didn't take me long to learn how to do what I needed to do in terms of the only thing you really have to pay attention to, I think, if you're interested in Accurate emulation is stuff like playing a little bit with the frame skipping options and things like that, maybe some of the graphical options, but there's plenty of advice on the forums and things like that. Oh, these Space Invaders enemies, I love these. They're just inspired. The game tips its hat to classic video games in a number of ways, and I find this kind of stuff really endearing. Just, you know, games made by gamers for gamers. People who are obviously in love with their craft. It's, you know, you can tell that games like this are a real labour of love, made by passionate people who love what they're doing. So yeah, I was talking about save state practice, and to finish my explanation, yeah, for those that aren't aware, what I'm talking about is the fact that this arcade emulator called MAME, M-A-M-E, which stands for something, multi-arcade something emulator, I don't know, you can Google it. But what it allows you to do, essentially, is just save what you're doing at any moment in the game and then go back to it whenever you want. So the difference is that whereas when I'm playing it on the PlayStation, if I wanted to practice levels 50 and 60, I'd have to actually play through 1 to 50 just to get there and practice. But on MAME, I would get to level 50 and make a save state. And then the next day, I just turn on MAME, load up Bobble, and load my save state, and I'm immediately on level 50, and I can just practice level 50. Then I make a save state on 51, and etc. So I can practice each level individually, learn how to do each one, try it over and over again until I've got it and I understand what I'm doing. And I mean, God, I'd love to know how much time that would have saved me if I had actually tried to get the 1cc from just playing the old school way. And the save state practice thing is interesting because I have come across a few guys, particularly in the shoot 'em up community, who poo-poo the save state thing a little bit, almost like they kind of think it's cheating. And I mean, I totally don't think it's cheating. I think if you've got some way to make your practice more efficient, then you should absolutely take it. But having said that, I must say, it kind of feels like cheating. It feels like, oh my god, it can't be this easy. Because it's allowed me to achieve something that I never thought I'd do. I never thought I'd 1cc the game. Because it can just be so punishing and random at so many points in the game that your chances of getting through 1 to 100 in one go are tiny unless you know each level intimately. And what the save state practice has let me do is to know, I don't know each level intimately, but I certainly knew them well enough to actually eventually get through a 1cc. I could certainly get much better at this game. I could get way more consistent with a lot of the levels. I was lucky as hell there to get away with that, and that happens a lot in this run. This is a good level. I like this one. I like the levels where you have to just bounce on bubbles while you're waiting for things to happen. Like I was bouncing on the lightning bubbles while I was waiting for all the enemies to die from the fire. You have to be careful in situations like that, because if there's too many bubbles on screen, sometimes the one you're jumping on will pop, and that will screw up your run. So yeah, and the save state thing, I mean, yeah, there are some purists who kind of think that it's some kind of cheaty, dishonest way of practicing, but it's increased my enjoyment of the game. So I think really that's that's always going to be the most important thing. It means that I'm gonna play it more. I was able to achieve more in the game. Obviously, it's really helping me learn some of the shmups that I've been playing. Hoping that I'll be uploading some 1ccs some of them at some point. Same thing, I uploaded a 1cc of the AVP Alien vs Predator arcade game recently. Again, I don't think I ever would have got that without the save state practice. And this is a good one. There's a number of levels in this game that teach you. They started a lot earlier than this, and I haven't spoken about it yet, but they teach you this idea of cheesing the walls. That there's kind of a weird mechanic going on with the walls in this, in the sense that if there's a wall above you, you can jump through it. So here I'm going to try and jump on a bubble, and you'll see that I'm kind of going to go through the wall in order to pop that enemy like that. I'm sort of halfway in the wall, and you can use that to kill enemies, and that's entirely intentional. There are obviously some levels that can only be completed by doing that. And the game starts introducing levels that use that idea quite early on. And then every so often it will give you another one where it increases the complexity of how you have to use it. And this is kind of taken to its ultimate form on level 99, where you really... the whole level is just like a big red herring. We'll have to wait till we get there, and you'll see what I mean. But you're just... there's a few levels later on where you're just cheesing the walls and going through the walls, kind of like that, in order to complete the levels. And I like the subtle way that the game gradually teaches you to do that through the level design. But yeah, going back to the save state thing, I think what I find interesting about it, having discovered MAME now and using the save state practice, is that it reminds me a lot of a conversation that goes on in music about good and bad practice routines, practice methods. And I came across an interesting article a few years ago by, he's kind of a psychologist, and he helps concert musicians improve their performances. Kind of, you know, he helps professionals kind of get out of their own head and enjoy what they're doing, rather than being stressed out by performance anxiety and that kind of thing. And he wrote an interesting article about learning music backwards. So his idea was that a lot of musicians have this problem when they're learning a piece of music. And the problem is that they will start playing a piece. Let's say they get halfway through and they make a mistake. What most musicians do in that circumstance is start again from the beginning. And that leads to a lot of problems, because by the time they have actually finished learning the piece, they end up in this situation where maybe they know the first 32 bars like the back of their hand. They could do it in their sleep. But then the end of the piece is kind of a little bit grey and fuzzy because they haven't practiced it anything like as much. And that's because they keep going through this cycle of playing the first 32 bars over and over and over and over again, and then eventually making a mistake and going back to the beginning. So they end up in a situation where they've played the beginning of the piece thousands and thousands of times, but by comparison, they've only played the end of the piece, you know, a couple of hundred times, or nothing like as much. So they don't know it anything like as well. So this guy's idea was, one way to start addressing this and to try, is that you learn the last 16 bars first. And then you work backwards. You learn the last 16 bars, then once you got that, you learn the 16 bars that go before it, and etc, etc. You keep doing that until you eventually get to the beginning. And by the time you do, you know the whole thing, and you've practiced each part of the piece roughly equally. You know the end as well as you know the beginning, sort of thing. And I thought that was a clever idea. Of course, another way to fix it is just to get into the habit of not stopping when you make a mistake, and just carrying on to the end regardless, which is a very good habit to get into, to not get caught up on your mistakes and not to punish yourself for them. But it applies here because this is the same idea as the save state practice. I mean, obviously I haven't learnt the game backwards, but I've basically done the same thing. It has allowed me to practice the game in such a way that I'm able to get as familiar with the end of the game as I have been with the beginning of the game. And that's what I think is awesome about it. That's why I would recommend it to anybody. And if you are a player and you haven't looked into it, then just, Google MAME and download it. It's a very simple, once you've downloaded it, you just double click it and do what it says. I do find it, well, personally, I think the actual main, the main version of MAME is like a command prompt program that still feels kind of MS-DOSy. So I did download like a little a friendlier point and click interface for mine, which makes it easier, but either way it's very easy to get into. So that's a cane that I just picked up. I think generally the canes mean that when you kill the last enemy on the screen, any empty bubbles turn into point items. It's one of the special items to look out for. I haven't actually spoken about the game much in the past few minutes. You can see it's getting harder. And we're now getting into the territory where not all of these level strategies are mine. I got some of these from adamdawes.com. He provides a very good stage-by-stage breakdown of Bobble, and he's got a little video for each of his level strategies. And some of these, between 80 and 100, some of them are mine, and some of them that I was less confident with I got from adamdawes.com, or I at least, what I'm doing is like a hybrid of my strategies and his. But if you're into Bobble and you want to get better at it, check out adamdawes.com. I'll put a link in the video description. It's very, very good little guide. Getting close to the end. So this is where strategies are now getting very specific. You have to stand, like for instance in that first bit I had to stand in a very particular place to kill those first 3 enemies safely. Getting this last one is another cheese the wall situation. You can see the green bubbles going up there. So I'm going to stand in the wall and wait for a bubble to come along. This is why I'm not going to blow bubbles, because I want a bubble to appear, and I think the more you blow the less likely that is to happen. So I messed up the first attempt. I think I might be talked out now. I'm just gonna watch the end of it with you and give some inane comments. So, and you can see here my positioning and the order in which... Oh, here's a potion. Yeah, I got a potion there. So that's what the potion does. You don't get many items on this screen because there's not much empty space. But on some levels, a potion can just completely fill the screen with like 50 odd items. And you get a turn, what was it, 100,000 bonus for getting all the items. Kimmy is one of the developers, I think. We'll see the credits at the end, actually. It lists the developers. So here I'm aligning my score, creating lots of empty bubbles, and I've actually messed it up. But yeah, I think I was trying to align my score, but even though I messed it up, I still got all the score items because it was level 85. Remember what I said about levels being divisible by 5? So it happened automatically anyway. I think at this point I was getting pretty nervous because I realised that there was a good chance I could 1cc this run. And if you're a gamer, you'll know that that's, once you start realising that, then your heart starts pumping, your hands start sweating, you start shaking a bit. And I can think of a lot of games where the just the nervousness of getting close to a 1cc has actually ended the run. and you have to go through that a few times on some games to just control the bit of adrenaline that you get that makes your hand shake. But it wasn't too bad on this one. But I think when I was fighting the final boss, I was a little bit twitchy. So this is a good level to try and figure out. I like to try and figure these ones out myself before looking at other people's strategies. So here, basically, all I'm waiting for is for a fire bubble to get into the middle of the screen where that blue N is that I just popped. Once there's a fire bubble there, I can jump up and pop it and kill all the enemies. So you just have to wait for the bubbles to move themselves around. There you go. This is one of my favourite levels. So this is what I was talking about breaking bubble chains. You may think, well, how do I burst that fire bubble? What you do, push it to the edge, fire loads of bubbles, and then pop them. And that makes a chain to the fire bubble, which breaks it. I don't know why, but I always found that level really satisfying to do. Once you've figured out that mechanic, it's a nice one to use. The other thing to notice is that, as I mentioned, there are three special types of bubbles. There's water, fire, and lightning, and all three of them have the same property in the sense that they always go in the direction of your tail. So when you break a lightning bubble, the lightning always flies towards whatever way your tail is facing. When you break a fire bubble, the fire will land on a surface and then it will spread in the direction that your tail was facing when you broke the bubble. So you can use that to control which enemies it kills. So you get a bit of a break here. There's a couple of easier levels just to give you a little chance to chill out before you face the final boss. That book is a special item that causes an earthquake, and you collect lots of little bubs on this level for some reason. On this one you can try and burst all the enemies in one go for a big score. I think you get 64,000 if you break 7 in one go. They'll turn to diamonds there because I think I collected a special item just as they burst. Well, this is an Adam Doors strategy. I didn't figure this one out myself. Very precision bubble jumping to do on this one. It can be quite frustrating. Playing shmups is good practice for this because you have to be able to tap a D-pad direction very, very quickly so that you turn around without actually moving forward. And yeah, tap dodging shmups. There's good practice for that. Anyone who plays shmups will know what I'm talking about. This is a reasonably simple one once you've figured out the wall thing. You can see here as I drop down the bottom, I'm just going through the walls and able to kind of cheese the enemies by getting into a position where I can kill them but they can't kill me. Easy to get wrong though. If you are a little bit to the left here, then you will die. So you need to be careful with it. We're very close to the end. So I use the bubble chain method to pop these again. Just keep blowing bubbles and walk into them to pop the whole chain. You have to do a little jump hop here and choose the walls again. So as you can see, you know, these last 20 levels really are more puzzles than platforming levels. You spend a lot of time scratching your head just wondering how the hell am I supposed to get them. This is a weird one. I think I got this from adamdoors.com. Couldn't really figure out a consistent way of doing it until I realised that if you jump up to the top left, they all kind of collect together. Which I can't remember if I figured that out myself or if I found that on the Adam Doors website. I remember being nervous as hell when that guy escaped there, because I thought there's a good chance that he would come up and kill me because they escaped from their bubbles so bloody quickly on this stage. So I think we're on level 99. This one's actually quite easy to do once you know how to do it, because it looks like it's this jump here. You jump on that bubble to get to that gap, and unless you know that, then you're just going to spend ages trying to go round the way it looks like you're supposed to go round. So the whole thing is just a huge red herring. The gaps in the walls do not present a route. It's impossible to go the way that it looks like you should go. You actually just have to choose the walls. And we get to level 100, which is the boss of the game. And yes, I did have runs that ended here, despite having like at least 5 lives when I got here. The first time I got here, I had game over at the boss. He did manage to kill me like 4 or 5 times or whatever it was. But I think this is the second time I reached him in 1 credit. As you can see on this fight, all of your bubbles are lightning bubbles, so you just want to make sure that when you pop them, your tail is facing inwards. And then to get the good ending, just before he dies, I pressed the start button on player 2. Because if you finish this on your own, you do not get the good ending. You get the bad ending and it throws you back like 30 levels to try again. So to get the happy end, you have to have 2 players active when the game finishes. Happy end. And that's it. When I finished this, I was jumping around and fist pumping the air. Mitsuji, so game designer Mitsuji, Fukio Mitsuji, also designed Rainbow Islands. Unfortunately, Mitsuji died in 2008 after designing some fucking awesome games. Of course, the other thing that's surprising about this game is that despite playing it for 25 years, I still don't get tired of the music, and I think it's lovely. I mean, the actual game music, the music that plays while you're playing. You'd think it would kind of get incredibly annoying, but it doesn't. Thank you very much for your playing. Well, thank you for your programming, Taito. So that's the bubble. Oh, it's the screen, yeah. I'm not even sure I know what to do with this. I don't know if you're supposed to actually get something from those symbols in the middle. I haven't looked into this. Obviously, if you know Miss Clear round 1 to 20, you get the silver door. We know that. We've been in the silver door. You will find A, B, C, D. I don't know what that means. I'm going to have to look into this, or look on the wiki or something. I don't know what to do with it. But that is Bubble Bobble. If you've listened this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for coming. I hope you've enjoyed the game. I hope you've learned something. If you're playing Bubble Bobble, then good luck. If you want to get the 1cc, go easy on yourself. Download MAME. It's the best thing you can do, and it is doable. I'm not that great at this sort of game, but I think I achieved this in it was about a month overall. I played it a couple of hours an evening. The first 2 weeks was learning the levels. The second 2 weeks was doing full runs, so not that bad. But cheers, guys. Have a good day. Have a good afternoon. Have a good evening. And I'll see you next time. Bye.